1. Emiliano Sala. Emiliano Sala did not die after his dream collapsed. He died while flying toward it. Cardiff City had signed him. The Premier League was waiting. A new shirt, a new country, and the biggest chapter of his career were only one flight away. But Sala never reached Cardiff. That is what makes his story so painful. He was not a fading player chasing one last chance. He was a striker who had earned the biggest move of his life. At Nantes, he had fought for recognition. At Cardiff, he was supposed to start again, on a bigger stage. The transfer had been completed, the announcement had been made, the future had already changed. Then came the journey. On January 21st, 2019, Sala boarded a small, illicitly organized aircraft from Nantes to Cardiff. It should have been a simple crossing between his old club and his new one. Instead, over the freezing waters of the English Channel, the aircraft disappeared from radar, hiding a tragic truth of systemic failures and a pilot unqualified for the dark skies. For hours, then days, football waited in uncertainty. Nantes waited. Cardiff waited. His family waited. Fans who had never met him waited, because everyone understood the cruelty of the moment. A footballer had reached the door of his dream, and then vanished before he could step through it. Sala never played a single match for Cardiff City. No debut, no first touch, no first goal, no chance to show the fans why he had been signed. His story hurts because it is not only about a life lost, it is about a future that had already begun but never arrived. But Sala's tragedy was the pain of a dream that never started. Antonio Puerta's was different because for a few minutes, everyone believed the nightmare had ended. 2. Antonio Puerta. Antonio Puerta collapsed, then stood up. That is the part that still makes his story unbearable. In August 2007, Sevilla were playing Getafe. Puerta was only 22 years old. A gifted player from Sevilla's own city, loved not just as a footballer, but as someone who belonged to the club's heart. Then, during the match, he fell to the pitch. Football changed instantly. A stadium that had been full of noise became quiet. Players rushed toward him. Medical staff came on. For a moment, the result, the tactics, and the match itself meant nothing. Then, Puerta regained consciousness. He walked off the pitch under his own power. That should have been the moment of relief. The crowd wanted to believe the danger had passed. His teammates wanted to believe he was safe. Everyone watching wanted the story to end there, but it did not. Away from the cameras, inside the dressing room, Puerta's heart stopped again. The nightmare had returned, far more severe than before. He was rushed to the intensive care unit of the Virgen del Rocío hospital, caught in a silent, desperate battle for survival. For 3 days, Sevilla waited, Spain waited, football waited, hoping for a miracle that would never come. Then the news broke. His body had finally succumbed to the effects of a hidden, undiagnosed heart condition. Antonio Puerta was gone. His death was devastating not only because he was so young, but because hope had appeared first. The world had already seen him walk away. People had already allowed themselves to breathe again. Then grief returned. That is why Puerta's tragedy has never left Sevilla. He was not just a player who collapsed during a match. He was the player everyone thought had survived. And when hope is taken away after it has already arrived, the pain becomes heavier. Puerta walked off the pitch alive, but football had already begun losing him. Puerta's story gave football false hope. Miklós Fehér's tragedy gave almost no warning at all. 3. Miklós Fehér. Miklós Fehér's final night began like thousands of ordinary football nights. He came on as a substitute. That is what makes it so chilling. In January 2004, Benfica were playing Vitória Guimarães. Fehér entered the match in the second half, another player stepping from the bench into the rhythm of the game. There was no sign that this substitution would become one of Benfica's darkest memories. Fehér was 24 years old, a Hungarian international, a forward with years of football still ahead of him. He was not at the end of his career. He was still in the middle of becoming. Then, deep into injury time, everything stopped. After assisting the winning goal, Fehér committed a minor foul to delay the game. The referee showed him a yellow card. Fehér looked at him, smiled a gentle, famous smile, bent forward in sudden agony, and collapsed backward onto the turf. It was his final expression on earth. He had suffered cardiac arrest on the pitch. Players looked helpless and wept openly. Medical staff tried frantically to save him. The stadium, built for songs and pressure and emotion, became a place of absolute shock. There are moments in football when nobody knows what to do. The players cannot play. The fans cannot cheer. The referee cannot continue. Everyone is suddenly reminded that the person matters more than the match. Fehér was taken to hospital, but his heart would not restart. His death shook Benfica, Hungary, Portugal, and the wider football world because it came so suddenly. One moment, he was part of the game, sharing a final smile. The next, the game had become meaningless. The score no longer mattered. The result no longer mattered. Only Fehér mattered. He had entered the pitch to play the final part of a match. Instead, his name became part of football's deepest sorrow. Fehér's tragedy happened in front of a stadium. Davide Astori's happened in silence, and somehow that silence made it even heavier. 4. Davide Astori. Davide Astori was supposed to lead Fiorentina onto the pitch. Instead, his absence stopped Italian football. There was no live collapse, no crowd watching in fear, no match suddenly frozen around him. His tragedy came quietly, before the cameras, before kickoff, before the day had even become a football day. Astori was Fiorentina's captain, a respected defender, an Italy international, a calm leader. At 31, he was at the stage of his career where a captain becomes more than a player. He becomes the person others look toward when pressure rises. Fiorentina were due to face Udinese. The routine should have been normal. Breakfast, team meeting, travel to the stadium, the armband, the tunnel, the match. But on the morning of the game, inside his room at the team hotel in Udine, Astori never woke up. A silent, hidden heart defect had claimed his life while he slept. The news moved through Italian football like a shockwave. Serie A stopped instantly. Fixtures were called off. Rivalries paused. Clubs that usually stood against one another suddenly spoke with one voice. Astori's tragedy is different because it is built around absence. The empty room, the empty seat, the empty captain's place. The match that never began. Some football tragedies are remembered because everyone saw them happen. Astori's is remembered because no one saw it coming. He was expected to guide his team that day. Instead, the league stopped to mourn him. Astori's death was the grief of one missing captain. Chapecoense was the grief of almost an entire team disappearing before the greatest match of their lives. 5. Chapecoense. Chapecoense were flying toward history. That is why the tragedy broke the football world. They were not a giant club used to finals and global attention. They were an underdog Brazilian team from Chapeco, a club that had climbed miraculously through the divisions toward the biggest night in its history. The Copa Sudamericana final was waiting. Atlético Nacional were waiting. A continent was about to watch a story that should have been about belief, rise, and football romance. The players boarded the flight not as defeated men, but as men on the edge of glory. Then the team never arrived. Just miles from their destination, due to a catastrophic and preventable fuel exhaustion error, the aircraft crashed into the Colombian mountains. The disaster killed 71 people, including 19 Chapecoense players. In one night, a club lost a squad, staff members, journalists, and futures that had been built together. This was not only one footballer gone. It was a dressing room broken, a team photo torn apart, a final that could never be played the way it was meant to be played. What makes Chapecoense so painful is the timing. They were not leaving the tournament. They were not returning from failure. They were traveling toward the biggest match their club had ever known. Then came one of the most emotional gestures in football history. Atlético Nacional asked for Chapecoense to be awarded the title. Later, Chapecoense were declared Copa Sudamericana champions. They became champions, but not through celebration. No final whistle. No running toward the fans. No trophy lifted by the players who had earned the journey. Only grief, respect, and a football world trying to honor a team that never reached its greatest night. Chapecoense had flown toward a final. Tragedy turned them into memory. Chapecoense lost a team on the way to history. But decades earlier, Manchester United lost a generation that many believed would define the future of football. 6. Munich Air Disaster. The Busby Babes were not just Manchester United's present. They were its future. Young, Fearless, gifted, and shaped by Matt Busby's vision, they represented something new in English football. They were not only winning at home, they were challenging Europe. They were young enough to dream and good enough to make others believe. That is why Munich still feels so heavy. On February 6, 1958, Manchester United were returning from a European Cup tie against Red Star Belgrade. The aircraft stopped in Munich to refuel. Conditions were difficult. 2 takeoff attempts were abandoned. Then came the 3rd attempt in the slush and snow. The crash shattered the aircraft and took the lives of 23 people. 7 Manchester United players died instantly on the runway. An 8th, the generational prodigy Duncan Edwards, fought desperately for 15 days in a German hospital before his severe injuries finally claimed him. Jeff Bent, Roger Byrne, Eddie Coleman, Duncan Edwards, Mark Jones, David Pegg, Tommy Taylor, Liam Whelan. Those names became permanent in the memory of the club. Munich was not only the loss of players, it was the loss of what those players might have become together. The Busby Babes were still growing. Their best years were not behind them. They were ahead. That is what makes a lost generation so painful. You do not only mourn what happened, you mourn everything that will never happen now. Manchester United had to rebuild from grief. Matt Busby survived and carried the weight of that memory into the years that followed. The club rose again, but it never left Munich behind. It could not. Munich became more than the darkest day in Manchester United's history. It became part of the club's soul. The Busby Babes never grew old together, but their names did. These tragedies are different, but they all hurt for the same reason. Football is built on tomorrow, the next match, the next goal, the next transfer, the next final, the next season, the next generation. Emiliano Sala was flying toward a dream he never reached. Antonio Puerta gave everyone hope before grief returned. Miklós Fehér entered a match like any substitute and left football with the memory of a final smile. Davide Astori was supposed to lead his team, but his silence stopped a league. Chapecoense were traveling toward the biggest final in club history and became champions through mourning. The Busby Babes were Manchester United's future until Munich turned promise into memory. That is why football tragedies stay with people. They are not only about death, they are about unfinished stories, the debuts never made, the matches never played, the goals never scored, the trophies never lifted, the teammates who kept looking for someone who was no longer there. Football remembers its legends for what they gave to the game, but sometimes it remembers them even more painfully for what they never got the chance to become.